You join me today with my friend Frankie Thorogood, absolutely incredible e-commerce entrepreneur. A lot of his projects are seriously impressive. So I'll just give you the full bio here. So from a £3,000 debt to a multi-million pound exit, Frankie Thorogood's journey is a masterclass in e-commerce success. He built TCA, a top-selling sportswear brand, on Amazon by doing the exact opposite of what most sellers do. Now with his new venture, Potted, he's proving his strategies work across industries. Whether you're struggling with cash flow, battling giants in the crowded market, or looking to turn a side hustle into a serious business, Frankie's insights could be the game changer you need. So get ready for a no-holds-barred conversation about building, scaling, and selling e-commerce brands in record time. If you want to know more about how to create products that customers rave about and keep coming back for, whilst building a brand that stands out without racing to the bottom on price, you won't want to miss this. I come from a very personal perspective here, where obviously my background is in SEO and marketing, but increasingly with the rise of AI, we're seeing much more commodity and Google updates. So how can we as entrepreneurs and marketers get better at creating products and owning the full stack, not just selling them, but owning the product? So with that, we hand over to Frankie. What have you been focusing on lately?
Hey man, well, thanks for having me. And I might get a transcript of that intro because it was better than anyone I've ever written for myself. But yeah, thank you for the kind words. And recently, it's been a period of change actually for us at Potted. As you mentioned, Potted is my main brand and business now, and it's been a bit of a period of change. We've grown a lot. The team has grown a lot in the last 6 months. So with that brings a whole load of different challenges. It's like a different stage of the business now. So that's been like an interesting challenge. And then, so you get distracted by that for a while, but then you have to always come back to the core principles, which I'm sure we're going to talk about more, which is you're making a great product and then you're getting it in front of the right people. So that's kind of what I've been up to recently.
And so for context, this started in 2021, wasn't it? So it's been a very quick rise within about 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. I started Potted I started working on it in the January, I think 21. And I think we've sold our first product in March 21. So it was a very quick launch, actually.
And
And
for the
I
record, this was
still,
literally a pandemic side hustle where you were on the kitchen table divvying up blocks of clay and posting them out yourself.
exactly, yeah. So I'd been running the first company that you mentioned, TCA, for 9 years at this stage. And we were just about gearing up for our exit at this moment, so January 21. And I kind of knew, I had a good feeling that we would get it done in the next few months. And to be honest with you, I thought when that business gets sold, I might be quite bored and have nothing to do with myself. And I better start something else quickly. Otherwise, I might find myself with, like a massive gap in my life, nothing to do. So I started Potted as you feel like a side hustle, never intended it for it to become a big business at all. And it was just a way to like flex creative muscles and try something and, be scrappy again. Like you said, I was chopping up clay on the kitchen table, wrapping it up, taking stuff to post office, all the classic entrepreneur, like, early stage business stuff. And it was almost against my will that it just became what it is today, which is like a huge, huge business, huge revenue. And we're about 15 people now on the team.
Just a quick note from me, and then we'll get back to the interview. If you've been inspired by Frankie, then of course, e-commerce is a golden opportunity right now. Ever since most recent Google updates, it's been much harder to run an affiliate website, but what we've seen is Google is loving e-com brands. So if you can launch an e-com product or a service, the chances are you're going to rank far better than you would have done a year ago, where you had all these affiliate websites above you for the same keywords. So massive opportunity. I'm trying to dig down on it. And so ever since speaking to Frankie, I've been digging deep to look for interesting e-com product ideas that represent the same kind of thesis that he did, where what you're basically doing is curating some existing projects, making it your own, adding some branding, adding some instructions. And what you have is a kit that's actually quite simple to produce. However, there's still some barriers to entry there. It's not going to be easy for a competitor to immediately rip you off, and therefore it's not going to be too competitive. So I love this idea of curating, especially where there's particular equipment involved. If you can invest just a couple of $1,000s in something like this, then the chances are you could build a really good brand that someone who's only got $100 to invest is not going to be able to compete with. So I'm going to be exploring much more ideas like this on my channel. But in the meantime, I've taken all this research and produced a list of 50 e-commerce ideas that you can download absolutely free. Just go to seojesus.com, click on the big red button that says Ranking Revelations newsletter, and I'll add the link to this Google Sheet in the welcome email. So check your junk as soon as you sign up. And of course, when you own a product like this, you can go all out, list on all the marketplaces like Amazon and Etsy, focus on organic, but also do paid ads and affiliates as well. So obviously I'm very long on SEO. I think it's a fantastic traffic source, but equally many e-com brands rely too much on just one traffic source. I know people who'll make 3 million in revenue on an e-com brand, but they're spending 2.5 million on the ads to get there. So in order to have a real secure asset they can potentially flip and sell, then make sure to diversify your traffic sources. I know people doing really well with paid media or affiliates, but they continue to invest in SEO because they know that makes that brand a much more valuable asset with a diversified source of traffic. Very nice. So obviously I think the big question here is, obviously this wasn't your first rodeo, and it seems like you ran the gauntlet before with your previous business, learned the mistakes, and then have therefore had a lot more experience with this project. So if we go right back to the beginning, so it was football snoods, wasn't it? So how did you turn what you saw as this trending product into a multi-million-pound sportswear brand on Amazon?
Yeah, it was cute. I mean, it was a kind of like a classic story in some ways. I played and still play Sunday league football. So every Sunday morning, get down to Hackney Marshes, run around like in the mud, trying to play football very badly, most of the time. And footballers, I noticed footballers started wearing these snoods, which is like a neck warmer, like you just put it over your head and it sits there and warms your neck up. And they were kind of, what's the word? Like people really hated them. They had a bad rap. It was kind of supposed to be like only soft footballers are so soft these days. You know, they won't need to wear these nudes, but they were very famous and I guess viral. This, the word term viral hadn't really been invented. And so basically I wanted to wear one because I thought it would wind up my opponents. I thought that they would like see me as a soft player and it would kind of get a little bit of friction going in the game, which is actually how I get the best out of myself. So I was like, I really want to buy a snood so I can wind people up at Sunday league football. Again, in those days, Amazon, you couldn't actually buy, like, you could buy very few things on Amazon in those days. There wasn't a big, like the internet wasn't that good for like retail. So basically I went to the two stores in the UK that sell sportswear. I went to JD Sports and I said, can I have a snood? And they said, we don't sell snoods. And then I went to Sports Direct and like Sports Direct have everything. So there was no doubt I could buy a snood there. But when I got there, they said, we don't have snoods. So that was obviously the light bulb moment when I thought there'll be loads of other people like me that do want to buy one. There's actually nowhere to get them. So how can I source some and start selling them myself? That's how the business got started.
That's always the classic founder story that we all wish we could emulate. I think a lot of the time, though, we basically start from the opposite end, don't we? We want this online business, we want this e-com product, and we're looking around and there is almost that sense of everything's been done, which I'm sure is obviously naive. So would you advocate almost holding off and waiting until the opportunity finds you rather than forcing it to find the product?
It's a good question. And I think that there's an argument on both, from both aspects. And actually I struggled. So like I'd finished university, I had my degree, I got rejected from all my job applications. I wanted to work in advertising and I was sat on my ass basically doing not a lot. I had a few like very like crappy jobs. I worked in like a boiler room doing sales for a while, which was very, very demoralizing and depressing, but also an amazing learning experience. And basically I wanted to start a business. I was really convinced of that, but I didn't know what to do. And so for me, the problem was sitting around and not trying enough stuff. Actually, I think that was my problem back then. And I remember watching, it was like I think it was the bank, NatWest or someone put on like this webinar, for like entrepreneurs, and Deborah Meaden from Dragon's Den was on it. And I just remember like one thing I remember from that webinar was Deborah Meaden saying, just stop thinking about stuff and just try things. Just try something. And that was the message that finally hit home. And I was like, you know what? She's so right. I can't be waiting for the perfect idea. I need to just try something. And I guess that when the snood situation arose, that was the kind of spark when I was like, this is a chance for me to go and try something. I don't have a big master plan. I can't tell what the whole business is going to look like in a year or 3 or 5 years, but I've got something here with demand. it seems like a lack of supply. Let me go try and make something happen. And so I started that company with £100. I spent £100 to buy some snoods from Alibaba. And um, like now looking back on it, I'm just like, wow, I wish I could have tried something a year before. I wish I could have tried anything. And you never know where it's going to end up. I think you speak to any like entrepreneur that's kind of had some level of success, they built something of a decent size. What they started with is probably not what they've ended up with. And so that's kind of like a very common trait I've noticed in entrepreneurs is that whatever we do, normally it's actually not going to work. Like the first idea is probably not going to take you where you dream of being. So what we do is we end up shifting, changing course the whole time. And obviously you can't shift and change course and you can't end up anywhere if you don't start somewhere. So for me, the message I had to receive at that point was just try anything, just try something because you never know where that's going to lead. And of course, like snoods was a viral trend. It was a fad. And, we sold snoods for about 12 months or I did, and never sold another snood again. But what it allowed me to do was pivot and change that into the brands that became TCA, that became, a 7-figure sportswear brand, and and eventually got a big exit out of it, and everything changed. So for me at that time, I needed the message: just try and do anything. But like you said, the other side of the coin is you kind of you want to avoid the other kind of side of it, which is scattergun approach. I just want to make money. How can I quickly get money straight away? And I think there's a lot of people that suffer from that as well, that could do with a little bit more foresight and planning. So I think it's different needs, basically for different people, and it depends on what you tend towards.
Yes, I've always said to people that rapid testing and iteration is everything because, as you say, your chances of being right are minimal. If you can start 5 to 10 test cases, but really manage that downside risk, so you're not putting in more than a couple of hundred on each one, and then you can quickly 80-20 those and work out what's working. So that's always profound. But yeah, to your point, I think we probably had the same background, actually, exact same for me, out of university, thinking, what do I do now? And yeah, literally, you're just trying to keep a roof over your head. And there is almost that sense of desperation. I think that's where a lot of people are at, especially in the current climate, inflation through the roof. For a lot of people now, a couple of grand a month online, even if that's in addition to a day job, is exactly what they're looking for. But I think what stood out there, what you said, was just the fact you did it for $100. Whenever I've looked into ecom, I always assume you need that sort of first 10, 20 grand of inventory to really get anywhere. But it sounds like you were able to test with much smaller than that. I know most of the successful ecom guys I know, it is always that we'll take a fairly simple product on Alibaba and we'll make some very small changes to it. But that's enough proprietary differentiation to then blow up that brand.
Yeah, you know what? There's so many different ways to do this, and like, that was another trap I fell into in my early days. Was like trying to work out how to make a successful business, and I felt like there was one way, and I was trying to find the answers and like listen to people and learn the one way. Now with experience, there's like many, many infinite ways of having a successful business, and for some people, it's start with $100 worth of snoods and see where it takes you, and for some people, it's not, and it is not right or wrong. Yeah, I guess that's the, I had one of my best mates at uni. He was a lot. I've always had the problem of what's the term, Stuart, when you like procrastinate too much and it's like rhymes.
Stayed ahead, you're dead.
Paralysis from analysis.
Yes, that's the one.
Paralysis from analysis has been my problem. So yeah, I've always been like that. I had a mate at uni, and he was like launching websites and trying things, from our like student accommodation. And like I just thought, what you're putting up here is shit. Like this looks rubbish. But the joke was on me because he was learning, like exactly like you said, he was trying stuff and failing and learning. So
It's
there's always a
incredibly
balance to be
frustrating for
struck
me
at
looking
first.
back at how often we've had this path, you and I both, where we've always been told you need to get these good academic qualifications and follow this trusted path. And then you realize the person who did quit school early just went straight into commerce of some form, even if it was just a local decorating business or something like that. And you realize they've got 5 years ahead of us and have now got all this experience on the entrepreneurship side. And you think, yeah, why did no one tell us this?
Yeah, and I think that I think there's can be a risk with that side as well. Another lesson I've learned is like to not try and do everything on your own. Um, there are people out there's basically always someone out there who's done what you're trying to do. And like I fell into the trap of thinking I have to solve everything myself and work out all the answers.
Hmm.
So even those people that have more of an impetus to go and do and try things, I think they can fall into the trap of trying to always do it themselves, which is exactly what I did. And then again, with hindsight, it's like, well, you can usually find someone that actually has all the answers rather
Yeah.
than spending a year working it out. You can just find them and ask. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle as well. And at the same time, sometimes people can tell us all the right things and we just won't listen and we have to learn the hard way ourselves. So again, I think it's just to be honest, a lot of it is like self-awareness, so just to work out the way you tend to think, what your blind spots are, and the kind of, the standard trap that you fall into. Each person has a different one, and just trying to counteract it. I think that's probably the way I think about myself and how to like do better.
Yeah, and I think starting with that bootstrapping mentality is always obviously you have to go through it, but you have to grow out of it as well. So that idea of we want to minimize cost. I can't afford great people. I have to learn it myself. And then, but steadily, when things start working, you need to sort of get rid of that mentality really quickly. So in your case, it was
Oh yes,
literally
yeah.
$100 worth of snoods imported from Alibaba. Was that like a private label type thing?
It's like like private label didn't even like exist as a concept, to be honest. Like I didn't, to be honest, I didn't even really know what that was for like until like 2 years ago. But it was a generic nude. It was straight off the production line. I think we did nothing to it. We just ordered them.
Right, so
So
it was
yeah, it
straight
was a
wholesale import. Yeah.
very wholesale import. And then and one day, about 3 months into my career as a snood seller, I realized I had no sales that day, and because I started on eBay, but I didn't even bother with Amazon at the start. I went on straight onto eBay. It's the easiest way to like put something on for sale. And one day I had no sales, and I had a search, and I realized that someone had obviously found the same supplier, listed the same product with the same picture for like 50p cheaper. And that was my kind of first lesson in trading in commodities. Um, so yeah, it's not sustainable. It wasn't a sustainable way to do business, and that was an important lesson for me, which I took into ultimately like growing the brand that I did create.
I was going to say that going back to what you said about private label not existing then, it does kind of seem like you had a big advantage in terms of being at the right place at the right time. Because I was really interested in FBA probably 2017, something like that. And yeah, I really wanted to produce like a men's grooming brand and basically supply safety razors and shaving soaps, ironically. And yeah, did all the research, but I thought it's still you've got all these SKUs, you're going to have to put the money down to actually get them manufactured and shipped. And there's a big sunk cost there in terms of you then got to store this stuff before you could even make money from it. And eventually I thought, I've got the skill in SEO. Let's just build an affiliate website and we can work out what sells from selling other brands. And then to your point about you never end up where you think you're going to be, and ended up having a really profitable website and thought, I don't even need to go down the e-commerce route because this site is doing so well just selling other people's products. I might as well just keep doing that. And then I sold that website and used that to start the agency, delivering the same SEO results to my clients. So complete pivot, but starting with that, yeah, how do I get a batch of these ecom products from China cost effectively and then start selling them? And as you say, with that commodification, so many horror stories out there about anyone starting on Amazon and competing with so many people trying to do the same thing and that race to the bottom.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you can always look at stuff through different lenses. Like, look, you can look at a glass half full or half empty. And like, it's funny because I was so early to the game with Amazon, as you just mentioned, and it all ended up pretty well for me. Like, it was a successful business and a great exit, and it's like happy days. But there is a part of me that looks back on that time, just the same way that you kind of never bothered with Amazon. There was a time, I think people were well aware, like 2014, 15, 16, even 17, where basically it was a gold rush, like for FBA, right? Like there was tons of people on Amazon trying to buy things, and there just wasn't enough people selling anything. So it's like, classic stuff. Like you can just go and sell like a garlic press and make 20 grand a month, whatever. Like that, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. And I was on Amazon in 2012, and I completely missed all of that opportunity. I could have probably made 10 times more money if I had opened my eyes a little bit and seen the ecosystem for what it was. I didn't have to have a sportswear brand. I could have had a sportswear brand and a garlic press brand and a coat hanger brand. I could have had 100 brands, and I could have tried not very hard on all of them, and just succeeded because of the nature of the context of the environment. And so sometimes I look back on that and I think, did I miss an opportunity? Even though all my success was down to me being laser focused and executing the strategy that I did have, there's an argument to say that I missed maybe a bigger opportunity. On top of that, maybe even the bigger opportunity with the rise of social media, which I missed. Like we didn't really like activate around social media much at all. But there was tons of other brands at the time that were riding the wave of Instagram. Yeah, Instagram was invented in 2010. People forget that. So 2012, 13, 14, 15, it was like, you could do some crazy stuff on Instagram and get tons of followers,
Yeah.
tons of exposure, tons of sales. Influencers were like dirt cheap. That was when influencer marketing actually worked. And again, I was too focused on, you could argue I was too focused on what I was doing to see the bigger picture. But it just depends how you want to look at it. Like, again, what I did worked, and I'm very happy with what I did, and I'm pleased with what I produced. Um, at the same time, there were these other things happening outside of us that maybe we could have opened our eyes and seen. I don't know, like what I feel about that. I just think it's interesting to acknowledge.
And now moving into potted, obviously you've taken all those learnings. I think from my perspective, looking at your business, and what I really appreciated about it was the fact it was curation, basically. So you're taking out a lot of that commodity where you're still using commodities. You still got the clay, the paint, but it's all branded up. It's assembled into a kit, and then you're providing your instructions and different setups people can basically follow. So it's almost like a sort of coaching type offer, almost like a course, but with the materials provided. And therefore you got that level of, you're supplying information. It's intangible, it's high margin, but very valuable. Because anyone can go to a craft shop, buy all the same components, but they're not going to have the same experience as you are providing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I guess I wonder, like, how many products on this earth aren't just commodities at the end of the day?
Mm,
Like what is really actually unique and is protected by a patent or something similar? Like very, very few things, maybe in like technology. It's
yeah.
like, you can basically buy the same thing from 100 brands, regardless of what the product is. So the question is, why do we buy from one company and not another? You're also right in the sense that, someone has to be first and has to come up with a concept in this case of like combining things or taking value and adding it from different areas into like a packaged product. And so, yeah, I think customers like that. I think there's one of the ways I like to think about it is, um, if you like, there's an example I read in, like, I love reading advertising books. There's like a story they give where it's like someone goes into electronics shop, so it's like Currys or something. Currys even exist, so I don't even know. Like, you go into Currys to buy a TV, and there's two or three options that you get shown, and they all seem kind of the same, and like they got the similar spec. The one you buy is from Sony because you know the brand, you've heard of the brand, and that's why you end up buying a Sony TV up, as opposed to whatever other brands they had on offer. And the point is, like, you're not loyal to Sony. You don't care about Sony. You don't know anything about it. But what you do know is you're reducing your risk. So by buying a Sony TV, you believe you're reducing the risk of it being bad. And ultimately, that's what you're making your purchasing decision on. So a lot of times I feel like for customers, we're trying to sell them something. It's about reducing risk for them. So when it comes to pottage, they want to try pottery at home and they don't know where to start. They could go and like research and try and find out what the best, options are there for clay or some tools or learning where to learn from. But if we can position and package ourselves in the right way and build the trust up, they'll just come to us, even if we're more expensive, because they don't have to take a risk that it will go wrong or they'll get the wrong quality. They just trust, and it's not because they love us yet. They will hopefully in the future, but it's a risk reduction. So I think sometimes we get fooled when we're like marketing a product or like building a brand, which is like, how can we make people love us and always want to come to us proactively? Whereas maybe the better starting point is to think, what problems do they have? What unknowns do they have? And what risks are they aware of? And how can we just reduce those?
You've had a lot of experience with pricing ecom products as well, particularly how often overpricing actually performs much better than underpricing.
Yeah, so this was a crazy thing that happened with TCA. It was during COVID times, and we had an issue. I think we had an issue with stock shortage, so we couldn't get our stock fast enough to replenish. So we tried raising the prices, right, to slow down the rate of sale so that we could avoid going out of stock. And to our surprise, the sales went up. We tried raising the price again, and the sales went up. And it got to the point where we were outpricing and outselling people like Under Armour for an equivalent product. So we were charging more than them and selling more units than their equivalent product. And
You really find that
it's
that's what I call the red wine paradox, where if you're in a restaurant with a friend or a date, you're never going to go for the cheapest wine. If you are a bit cheap, you might go for the second cheapest wine, but most of us will go somewhere in the middle.
yeah, it's a really fascinating area of psychology. But I mean, from a product perspective, basically price is the biggest indicator of quality.
Mm.
It's really as simple as that. Like if you know nothing else about, even if you do know other things about it, if something's priced more, you will assume
Yeah.
that it's a better quality. And if something's priced too cheaply, it will raise concerns. And so there's many, many stories, from famous companies about this and how they're choosing their pricing. And even if they could be the cheapest one on offer, they would choose not to, because again, it would make them look like they weren't as good as their competitors. And as you say, like, especially with things like wine, like luxury goods, right? You just, the higher the price, the more the perceived value, but it's the same for every product. And so we're talking about Amazon a bit. I don't know if many people listening want to have a go at Amazon. I still think there's a massive opportunity to go and be a high quality brand on Amazon. I still think that if you go and search for something, commodity good, the example I always give is, again, during COVID, I wanted to buy some scissors because I had to cut my own hair. You wouldn't know about this, Stuart, obviously. But I decided I'll cut my hair. I need to buy some scissors. So I go to Amazon, hair scissors, whatever. And the first 3 results are a picture of a pair of scissors. It looks completely fine. But the price was $2.99 or something. And I just thought, I don't want to cut my hair with something that costs $2.99. I think I'm better than that. So I kind of scroll down a bit, and the next offer is a pair of scissors, and it's $5.99. But it comes, it's like a pair of scissors, and it comes with an apron and a comb. I'm not opening a barber shop. I just want a pair of scissors that I trust to cut my hair. So I keep going. And this is taking way longer, this buying process, than it needs to be, right? It's just a very simple thing that I'm trying to purchase here. These are 10 minutes of going through listings. And eventually I find a pair of scissors that looks fine and costs $8.99. And I think, you know what? That's good enough. That sounds like it's something that's good enough for my hair. So I buy a pair of hair scissors for $8.99. Was it the same pair of scissors that was being charged for $2.99 by someone else? It probably was. But I just felt like I'm better than $2.99. I want something that's gonna, something that I trust. So I would rather pay more. And I think that mindset people have for most products. And so we should be taking advantage of that. I think Amazon is normally a race to the bottom. I think there's a dearth of quality. And I think people, whether they realize it or not, want to buy something that aligns with their vision of themselves and what they think, they're worth. They would rather spend more on something that they think is better quality. And I don't think there's enough people offering that on Amazon. So specifically for Amazon, I still feel like there's a big opportunity to come in there and be a classy brand that charges more. And I think it can still be a successful strategy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us don't even realize the real value of premium pricing, and that if you doubled your prices tomorrow, what people forget is that your cost to supply isn't actually increasing. So you're actually massively increasing your profit. So if you're only at a 20% profit margin, which is a lot of e-commerce products, that's a lot of good e-commerce products, but then you double your prices, your cost to fulfill is still the same. So you've then gone up to a 40% margin. So you basically doubled your business. And you can then plow that into, as you say, the customer experience, the marketing, everything else that makes the business healthy. So it's really interesting when your fixed costs don't actually change. So increasing your prices is just printing more money per sale.
Yeah, I think it's as you said at the start, you can just test. You don't have to commit to it. You can just try raising prices and see what happens. And I think more often than we think it's a net positive. So I think it's something that people should try more often.
Now, obviously, there's a big gap here we've not talked about, where we started off with you importing snoods to your kitchen table for $100 and selling them on eBay. And then a couple of years later, you have this multi-million dollar exit, right? So what did that progression actually look like? I know you expanded into other products. Was it the same thing? Was it just import, or was there a bit more customization coming in there?
Yeah, so the snoods. As I said, the snoods started to die. Luckily, I was smart enough to see that writing was on the wall, and I noticed another trend, which was compression wear. Compression wear, which was made famous by the brand Under Armour. They kind of invented that category in the US, and it started to get some traction in the UK. And I noticed that some other brands were jumping into it, like Nike, but it was still a very young category. So that was really where the business started to take off. Was when I introduced some compression sportswear, and that was when the brand kind of came to life, TCA. And yeah, like it was like they were called base layers at the time, base layers, and it's slowly started to be called like compression wear. And that was kind of what jump started the business and took it into new levels. And that's what TCA became quite famous for, was its compression wear. Um, and then it was pretty simple from that point onwards to start, developing other products that the customers would want. So if they want compression wear because they're running, they probably want running shorts, or they probably want leggings, or they probably want a t-shirt or a vest or a long sleeve top to run in or to go train in the gym. So it was pretty simple path of product development. There's a lot of opportunity in a lot of places we could go with it. And ultimately that's kind of the path that I took. It was, the compression wear did really well. We famously launched a pair of men's running shorts, which went on to become the number one best-selling men's running short on the whole of Amazon, and it still is that today as well, 6 years later. Um, and yeah, that was basically what we did. Was more products, more colorway. A couple of interesting things we learned along the way is that, like, the more options people have, the more they buy overall. So just giving the choice of colors, even if no one buys half of the colors, it still increases the sale of the main color. So we learned that as well and introduced lots of color variations.
Where?
Yeah, and it took a few years, to be honest. It took years to like do this. But over time, that's what we did. We built the brand up. We actually got reached out to by athletes. So we had a professional boxer reach out to us on Instagram and say, I've been buying your stuff for ages now. I'm about to headline the O2 Arena. Can I work with you? Can I work with you, please? And we were like, yeah, I guess probably you can. That's how we started getting to the athlete sponsorship world. Although we actually very rarely paid them anything. It was just a mutual agreement, which was really nice. And again, that's something you get when you create great products. Those opportunities kind of come to you. So that was kind of what I did for the next 7 years.
Yeah, I think that point about timing, I've certainly been doubling down on this lately. I think we all get that wrong, but we've got this idea that we can rapidly build this business in 2 to 3 years, maybe flip it, and then never have to worry about money again. It just doesn't happen that way, especially when you're starting out. Most businesses, 5 to 10 years if they're successful, but you're compounding all that weight. So you just get bigger and bigger once you've actually given the time to grow. So, yeah, if you look at the average career, even going into a new job, you could be doing this for 10 to 20 years. So I think a lot of us need to turn around and accept that it's going to take that longer growth curve. And yeah, just give ourselves actually that time. I think the way to flip it around is, yeah, I need money now is how a lot of us start. But then you flip it around and you think, what was I doing 4 years ago? You think 4 years ago seems like a couple of weeks ago. So actually, these next 5 years to really 10x your business are probably not going to be as slow as you think they are.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's like a human thing, isn't it? Like in terms of like, what timescales are we thinking about? What timescales are we working within? And you're so right. Like people can kind of see a year ahead. And then, when people say like, what's a 3-year plan? I just think like, mate, who the fucking knows what's going to be happening in 3 years? Do you know what I mean? You can write a plan down, which is fine. Like, I think it's a good idea to think and try and make a plan. How likely is it to ever be accurate? I think is most of the time it's going to be completely wrong. Maybe the purpose it serves is to set you up on the right path. But yeah, I think it's very difficult to accurately predict anything more than a year late, even a year is too much. So 3 to 5 years, good luck to you. But on the flip side, you're exactly right, which is it's going to take 3 to 5 years to build anything of a reasonable value in 90% of cases anyway. So it's a bit of a paradox, I think, because I
Mm.
think if we really have to sit down at the start of a business and be like, okay, in 5 years, a really hard graft, I might have something that's valuable. Most people wouldn't want to do it. I just don't feel like that's a compelling, like story to sell ourselves. Whereas
Yeah.
if we do tell ourselves a story like in a year's time, I'm going to be rich, I feel like we've got motivation and we really want to go for it. Turns out to be a lie, but by that point it's too late because we're already in too deep and we have to keep doing it.
There is that gap in the game concept that you should compare yourself with where you were, 2 to 3 years ago, and see all that compounding, as opposed to there's this guy, he's doing this revenue, etc. Why am I not there yet? And in terms of
Yeah,
predicting ahead, there's this whole philosophical concept called super forecasting by Tetlock, and loads of research done into it. And basically, the conclusion is, yeah, none of us can predict anything more than the year. If we just look at the past few years where we've had war in Ukraine, as in war in Europe, major global pandemic, all these things we couldn't have seen coming.
yeah. You can't predict it, but you might as well just try anyway and just hope for the best.
Well, at the end of
Makes
the
us
day,
feel
the alternative is
better.
to go into a day job every day for the rest of your life. So,
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think I really just love the message of to just try something. Like when I think back on the snood thing, like there's so many things that I had no idea was going to transpire from it. Nothing, everything just trickled down from that one decision. I talked about eBay, but like initially I didn't even want to put anything on eBay. I was literally going down Oxford Street in central London.
uh,
I was planning to sell snoods into independent retailers. So I was going like door to door saying like, I'm going to ship in these snoods. Everybody wants them and I will sell, one snood to you for £3 and you can sell it for £5 or something. That was what I did while I was waiting for them to arrive, from China. And then it was just by chance I spoke to someone else who goes, oh, I'm selling phone accessories on eBay and you should just do that instead because I think his argument was my margin would be higher, which turned out to be a lie. My margin was a lot lower. I had to post everything and pay eBay's fees, but that's just how the journey began. So I just think, yeah, like getting started, you can have a vision for it, and just you'll just notice like things cascading and opening up in front of you if you can kind of be aware enough to see them. And then yeah, in 3 to 5 years time, if you know what you're doing and you're smart enough and kind of like we said, react and change to things, and you probably will be successful.
and it seems like you've been really good at spotting those emerging trends. I've noticed in the agency space at the moment, everyone's diving into ChatGPT prompts and automation agencies, as in we'll go to the local contractors and we'll get them set up on more of these types of things. Loads of OnlyFans agencies springing up all over the place. So, do you think to the average viewer, do you think there's maybe a lack of imagination? What do you think enabled you to spot these emerging trends faster? Are you using any tools, or is it a case of just going to a coffee shop and being present and noticing?
I think that this is about playing to your strengths because I am good at spotting a good idea. That is actually what I'm good at. I'm good at spotting a good idea because I suddenly feel something inside me and I'm like, you know what, if I feel that, then I think everyone else will feel that. I think I can empathize with the wider world and other people. And I think I'm good at, like I said before, I'm obsessed with advertising. And ultimately, I think advertising is about psychology and being able to communicate with people and like transfer an idea from one person to another. That's what I'm good at. So that's why I end up building the businesses that I've been building, is because I feel like I can see a great idea that's going to resonate with people. And I think I can work out what kind of brand and messaging will resonate with people. That's what I'm good at. Now, that's not going to be the same for everybody else. For other people, they might be more tactical in a sense. So they might not have a gut feeling about an AI, like a prompt tool, or like one of the agency like styles that you mentioned. They might not have a good gut instinct for it, but they might see everybody's doing it and there seems to be money in this space. And they might think, I've got a unique way that I'm going to manufacture my service offering, which is going to save me money so that my margins are higher, or I've got a marketing strategy that other people don't know about, which I can use to leverage and again get an advantage in this industry. So I would be rubbish at that. Like I just would fail because I don't have that type of tactical brain and I don't have those great insights, but someone else might do. So I think for me, the key is like just work out what you're good at and lean into that. If you think you're good at like, like whipping up a product or a service offering in a week, and so you can be first to market, then do that. If you think you're good at, like pushing things and getting out there because you've got some SEO knowledge or some email marketing knowledge or something else, do that. If you think that you've just got a great eye for a great product and a brand, then lean into that. And the other side, and then so that's what I would advise. I think like try to play to your strengths in terms of how to start a company. And then I think in order to scale and grow that company to something that's much bigger, we have to learn to compensate for the thing that isn't our strength. So whichever one of those isn't your strength, eventually you're going to have to find someone to come and complement you and have it. I don't think you'll be able to make something massive without, the other piece of the puzzle. But I think it's rare that anyone would have all of them to start with.
And on that note, so I don't think you're the numbers guy, but I think it's important to bear in mind with ecom. I was shocked when you look at some of the numbers, how margins are really low, conversion rates are really low. And so you meet these people who are doing 5 or 10 million in revenue, and then you ask them what the margin is, and it turns out they might be doing 10 million in revenue, but they're spending 8 million on ads. And yeah, the actual product might not actually have that much margin in the first place. Certainly, a lot of the projects I've looked at, once you factored in delivery, taxes, things like that, suddenly you might have had a 40% margin, but you've worn it down to 20 or so, and then somehow you've got to market it.
An advantage. You need an unfair advantage, whatever that might be. Maybe you just got, some brains like SEO brains, right? So you can leverage SEO better than other people, and that's how you're going to get an edge. If you don't have an edge, an unfair advantage in some aspect or another, whether it's your sourcing, whether it's your negotiating, your marketing, your fulfillment, you've got to have an edge somewhere, or ideally, you've got to have a little bit of an edge everywhere. Otherwise, you're right. You're like, you're nothing. You're just another cookie cutter entrepreneur with the same product, trying to sell it to the same people. And ultimately, that's why it's a race to the bottom, because you're left with one variable you can control, which is price. So at TCA, we used to try to create an edge for everything. I remember somebody gave me the metaphor, because I hate this question. People say like, what's your USP? What's your USP? Well, I would challenge you to think of many companies that have a USP realistically. There's not, major companies don't have one thing that differentiates them. Obviously they don't, because if they did, someone would have copied it many years ago. But the exception would be, as we said, like, a technology, something that's protected by law, like, or like some internal, like, intelligence that they've got that other people haven't caught up with yet. It's so rare. So the metaphor that someone gave me was like, you don't have a USP, which is like a string. You have like multiple advantages and multiple little edges across all the areas of your business, and they all weave together to make a rope, right? That's the metaphor. So when you weave all these little advantages together, you get a rope, and that's like a strong thing that you can build a company around. So at TCA, we had little advantages everywhere. We had really good product design. It was better than our competitors. I flew to China and negotiated, until 3 a.m. on my cost prices, right? To make sure that we had higher margins, which meant we could spend money on things that other people were doing, like much more better photo shoots, right? So we had much better photography than other people. I did all my own copywriting myself because I'm really good at copywriting. So we had an edge in copywriting. Then we had the extra margin we could spend on working with professional athletes, which no one else could do. So all of these little advantages created a successful business. It wasn't just one thing. So I think it's important to consider that as well.
Yeah, in my case, I find when we start out, we look for low barriers of entry, and then you realize that means anyone can do it. So I think a lot of these side hustlers you see where it's how to make your first grand a month, 5 grand a month, 10 grand a month. But yeah, if you're promoting on that on YouTube and anyone can do it, then it's not very sustainable. So these days, I'm looking much more for what are the friction points where you need hardware or storage or skill sets, or even certain authorizations. So in my case, I've got some financial authorizations, even do with vehicle licensing, things like that, where they're not difficult to get, but you do have to go through a process to do them, which is going to wipe out 90% of your competition because it's not easy. and so many people are going for the easy option. On that note, we've only got 10 minutes left. So I think let's do this masterclass moment here. If you were starting again from zero, for all those people watching have probably been watching how to flip phones on Facebook Marketplace, or what are some of the other ones, flipping cars, buying a lawnmower and then knocking door to door, mowing lawns. How would you start entirely over again? Yeah, I don't think we're really interested in the 10K a month business, more like the 100K a month business, which is perfectly feasible if you've got knowledge like yours. So how would you do it?
I guess the first thing I would do is I would just try. I would just start and try something.
Mm,
Okay. It might be some YouTuber telling you how to make 1 grand a month doing something that everyone's doing and it's not a sustainable business. But if you're doing absolutely nothing, if you're starting from zero, nothing,
mm,
then you're learning nothing. And if you're learning nothing, you'll never do anything.
yeah.
So looking at this is speaking to myself, I would say just try something. Just get in the game. Don't commit load of money, don't commit loads of time, don't think this is going to be the be all and end all, but just try something, or better yet, try many things. So that way you're in the game, you're learning, and that's when things can start to cascade and change and open up opportunities for you. So whatever catches your eye, whatever you think you might be good at, I would say that's step number one, is just try something. Um, and step number two would be find people that have already done it before. So in step one, you're learning on the job, you're learning all these things, you're going to adapt and change. And eventually you'll eventually stumble across something that's sustainable and that works for you and that plays to your strengths. But in step number two, you're kind of like speeding up this process because you're going to someone who's already done it and you're asking them for help, asking them for answers. And it's surprisingly easy to do. There's people all over the world, ourselves included, that don't mind and in fact enjoy giving out free information. So once you've had a little go here and you're working out what direction you might want to head in, that would be my second tip, is go find someone that's already done it before and ask for help. It's very easy to do. Um, number three would be, I'm going to say number three would just be the self-awareness piece, which is to start to work out, once you've done 1 and 2, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and what would be, what you could actually sustain. Because as we said, it's going to be 3 to 5 years on average to create something of serious value that is actually what you are dreaming of. And there's no point trying to do something that you hate for 3 to 5 years. So you need to be self-aware enough to notice where your passion is and what's driving you and what you actually want to get up in the morning and do with yourself. And if that aligns with a successful business, which is basically, if you're an entrepreneur, basically you always will, because you can make money doing anything. You want to be self-aware enough to realize what that is and double down on that thing that you're passionate about and that you can sustain and you can keep doing. And you want to be self-aware enough to notice what you're good at and what you're bad at, because you'll never go very far if you're only doing the one thing you're good at, or you're constantly trying to do the things that you're bad at. So for me, like, I'm bad at operations. When I got in my ops guy, who's now gone on to become my business partner, everything changed because he took that business like 100x where I could ever get it. And I was wasting all my time trying to do something I was bad at. So it gave me the license to work on what I was good at. And again, that's like a 10x return on my time. So those would be my 3 tips. Just get your foot in the door, just try things and start learning. Number 2, which I didn't do, but I wish I had, is go and reach out to people all the time, build your network and ask people for advice, ask people to tell you how they did it. There's always someone out there that's already solved your problems for you. You just need to go and find them and ask for help. And number 3 is like, be self-aware enough to notice what's working, what's not working, what you're enjoying, what's sustainable, and what your weaknesses are. And I think those would be my 3 tips.
Very nice. We don't want to give people answers on the plate, but just as a starting point, do you think there's kind of a, how can I put it, some categories of products that you'd at least be vaguely interested in if you had to start again? So in my case, when I thought about your point about curating components, I started looking at things like painting by numbers, for instance, where, again, the fundamental product, the materials are quite simple, but you're still applying this proprietary layer of your design, and then the branding on top of that. What are other examples I've seen? Things where I really like the idea of banner printing. So you've got that requirement that you need the hardware and the materials to produce conference banners. Once you've got that, there are plenty of companies out there that are doing these events all the time. And quite often they'll just buy a new banner each time because it's cheaper to ship it to the venue rather than carting it around the world. So I really like those sort of scaled processes where you have the hardware, you can do the graphic design, but then it's a replication strategy.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you can, I mean, it depends. Like, if you want to, it's not kind of what we're advising people starting from zero, but if you've got a bit of money and you've got something you want to invest, then if you can find a business that requires a mold, if you can find a
Mm.
product that requires a mold, that's like a massive barrier to most people who are looking on YouTube for like a product idea. They don't want to invest 5 to 10 grand for a mold in China. So if you can work out how to validate the idea, which is what I would do before, cashing out on a mold. If I can validate it to some extent, I'd be quite pleased to find a product that requires a mold, because that's going to like immediately discard 90% of other people that might want to come into that category because they just don't want to stomach that. So yeah, if there's like a decent barrier to entry, I think is what one of the things you're getting at, then that could be interesting for some people. For others, like it's too much too soon.
Yeah, I think
So
from my personal perspective, I would always encourage anyone who's just starting out, you probably do want some sort of consulting or service business. So double down, take the courses, learn on YouTube, get really good at a particular thing. Could be as simple as prompting ChatGPT or project management software, something like that. And then just reach out to businesses and do a simple service for $500 a month, something like that. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get that 10, 20K a month. But then I think after that, you're still in that commodified state. So then you're looking for something more proprietary where you can sink in that cash to something that's more safer that you actually own, is my perspective.
yeah, I agree with you. I think, yeah, it's very good advice to start with something that's low stakes and easy to test and trial and learn from. That's probably like a very good tip. But you've got to just be open-eyed and understand like what's happening. Sometimes it might be going badly, and that's fine as long as you're learning from it. You know what they say, like you don't lose, you either win or you learn. So I guess that's like the attitude that it's helpful to have in the like early stages of building a business.
Very nice. Got about 4 minutes left. So before we get you to sign off, I'm aware in the introduction, this could be a big topic, but we did say you went from basically near bankruptcy to then making serious cash from the TCA business. And that was your point about skill sets and how you didn't manage the cash flow too well in the early days.
Yeah, so this was actually about midway through the journey when it hit the point where I got to this moment where everything I touched turned to gold. Every product I launched was a smash hit. And I thought, great, well, I want to grow this company. So this year, instead of releasing 5 new products, I'm going to release 30. So we designed 30 new products. They're good products. We ordered, the same amount of stock we always order for a new product. And this was the year I learned what cash flow means, because we spent all our money on stock, and then the stock arrived and the suppliers wanted their balance payments, and we didn't have any money to do it because we hadn't sold any of that stock yet, which is very obvious, but I didn't realize it. So we got into a massive cash crunch. We ended up 300 grand in a hole, and we had to go and find it somewhere. And to be honest with you, I quite enjoyed that process. It was back to the wall time. I always had this like faith that we would turn it around, but most companies would fail at that point. Most companies would go bankrupt at that point because they would not be able to pay the suppliers. And yeah, and it was through lack of financial planning and lack of knowledge and a blind spot of what is blind spot that wasn't being covered. So I realized on that, through that process that I had to accommodate these weaknesses massively. It's still my finance is still a huge weakness on my part. It's not something I'm drawn to. It's not something I'm good at. But now we have people in place that are good at it, do enjoy it, and do know what they're doing, so it's taken care of. So yeah, it was a huge learning process for me. In some ways, we were very lucky. In other ways, you know, um, like I said, most people go bankrupt there, but we managed to turn it around.
I'm the
Um,
same as you. I'm big ideas guy, and then the minute numbers can catch me. So yeah, one of these econ projects I was looking at, and it was a printing project. I was looking at what the competitors were charging. I was looking at the materials costs, and I thought that all works out pretty well. I forgot that those competitors, they're probably including VAT in that. So immediately my margin comes down 20%.
yeah. I think like a lot of entrepreneurs are like us, where we're just going to skip over some of those smaller details. But it's just the way it goes. Like, we're always going to make mistakes. And things can change very quickly. I went from everything I touched turned to gold to 300K in debt. And about, what is it, like 2 years later, this business, I sold the whole business for 7 figures. And, it was the greatest, day of my life. So things can change very, very quickly. And I think that's literally the nature and the life of an entrepreneur, is changing, reacting, adapting. That's what we have to be good at. That's what we do.
Nice. On that note, how can people find you, keep in touch with you?
You can add me on LinkedIn, but I kind of hate it and never really go there, but I might start. And Instagram is also my name as well. So add me on Instagram. I like to chat to people on there.
Very good. Nice and simple. Okay. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll be sure anyone's got any questions about Frankie's piece, then do let us know in the comments. Obviously, ecom is a whole world that we've only just touched on, but I think Frankie's provided a huge amount of value here. And ultimately, it still comes down to sticking with the fundamentals, get started, focus on what's working, and try and manage that downside risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, mate. Been a pleasure.